Hey there, my name is Jacob Frey. I'm the city council member for the 3rd Ward, and I'm a civil rights attorney, and I'm running for mayor right now. And I really do appreciate the opportunity to share my vision as to how we can have shared prosperity through economic asset growth. Because it most definitely is possible, but the truth is it's not happening right now in our city. In fact, we have the biggest opportunity gap in the entire country. We're one of the most segregated cities in the entire country. And in our city right now, we have a long history of very intentional decisions that were made that have ultimately impacted communities of color in a negative way. I mean, from 100 years worth of redlining to 100 years worth of intentional segregation to a whole long time worth of very intentional decisions that separated communities of color from some of their most vital assets. I mean, look no further than North Minneapolis. You have this beautiful riverfront there, which is should be a treasure for our entire city, yet the residents of North Minneapolis are separated by a whole lot of heavy industrial, followed by a massive highway. And that's a problem for multiple reasons that we'll get into very shortly, but I want to touch on each one of the individual aspects that you've called into question here, and I really appreciate you sharing your opinion and your voice, and it's ultimately helped us to push out the message. So, first, affordable housing. I believe in creating that foundation from which people can rise, and the reality is a whole lot of people right now don't have that foundation because rents are skyrocketing out of control. We have a 1.5% vacancy rate right now in our city, and very soon, and right now in fact, people are being displaced from the communities that they've grown to love and that they've made wonderful to begin with. And that's not okay. So we are for the progress. We're for ensuring that people are generating generational wealth, but we need to make sure that these communities that have made these neighborhoods wonderful to begin with are able to stay. And so several pieces there. First, affordable housing. We have a massive crisis right now. We've lost about 10,000 units of affordable housing in just the last 15 years alone, and it's not like things were rosy back in 2002. And no matter how you break it down, we in our city do need to be putting our money where our mouth is. We do need to be bridging that gap between whatever constitutes the market rate and the affordable rate to make sure that we have affordable housing options in every part of the city. So let me touch on that first. I said every part of the city. We have a long history in our city of congregating all of the affordable housing, all the low income housing, all the Section 8 in really just a couple areas of our city, namely North and sort of the central or Minneapolis or East Phillips area. And that's not okay. I believe in affordable housing in every single neighborhood. I believe in affordable housing in Southwest, in Northeast, in downtown, in Southeast. I believe that everybody should have the right to live in a great neighborhood. And when you do create this diversity of socioeconomic backgrounds in every neighborhood, that's when you suddenly have different mentalities and ideas at the table. That's when entrepreneurship gets triggered, and that's ultimately when our city is really going to rock. So we need affordable housing. We need it all throughout the city. So the question that I brought up to begin with is how we're going to pay for it. We've put forward a very specific plan. I want to use what's called a value capture model to capture the value of certain parcels going into the future, accessing a percentage of the revenues generated from those increases in values, and say, you know what, this matters to us, we care about it, we're going to put our money where our mouth is, and we're going to make sure we've got affordable housing for everyone. And not just affordable housing at 50 and 60% of area median income. I want to see housing at 30% of area median income and 20% of area median income, so people have that next rung on the ladder from which to pull themselves out. And we know that housing, we do have discriminatory practices that presently take place in housing. We do know that it's harder for communities of color to get affordable housing and to get housing at all than it is for whites. And we need to do something about it, and the reality is that we can. So let's also talk about environmental justice, because if you have a home, that's great. But what we've seen is that you can quite literally predict a person's likelihood of, say, having a heart attack by the age of 60 simply based on the zip code in which they were born. And that's not okay. This is an economic issue because, as we've seen, people have health concerns. They aren't able to go into work. They lose their job. They aren't able to pay their mortgage. And the next thing you know, they're out on the street. I saw that as a civil rights and as an employment lawyer, and it's happening today. We can do something about it. So a few things. First, on environmental justice and pollution. About a year and a half ago, I authored an ordinance that tied pollution to fees. So for every pound of pollution that's emitted into the atmosphere, these companies are now charged a fee. In 1 year alone, we've been able to generate a substantial amount of money off of it, and we've actually been able to reduce pollution, carbon output by 6 million pounds, and criteria pollutant output by 18,000 pounds. We can expand on that even more so going forward. It generates money, but it also reduces pollution in the area, and we've seen pollution has been out of control. Secondly, I was a co-author of staff direction and ordinance on green zones. And what we ultimately want to see for green zones is we want to be tackling these communities that have a cross-section of both poverty and pollution. There are several of them. And by tackling, we want to give first allocation of resources to green development, green jobs, and making sure that we're able to properly build asset and wealth. And finally, I'm just passing a resolution right now on Ready for 100. Ready for 100 is talking about actually becoming a fully clean energy city, really within the next 15 to 20 years. We can do that. We got to set the roadmap, set the vision out, build out the coalition. But this is something that other cities are already substantially further ahead of us on, and we can do it too. Finally, jobs. We want to make sure that communities of color, that new Americans, that communities traditionally left out of the process are not only able to make $15 an hour. I mean, $15 an hour is great, but let's be honest, it's still not a life. I want these communities to run with a brilliant idea, become entrepreneurs, and then ultimately live a brilliant life. First, let's talk about vocational training in the schools. I want to see welding, painting, and glazing, yes, but even coding. You could start teaching a 5-year-old to code, and by the time they've graduated from high school, even if they don't go on to college, they've got access right there to a living wage job. We can do that, and the city should be coordinating with industry and business to make sure that they are well connected with our public school system. Second, recruitment and retention. We have this dynamic right now where by the year 2020, 50% of the workforce is going to be millennials. 50% of the workforce is going to be millennials, which is a gigantic opportunity right now for our city. But it also means that we need to be recruiting and attracting and retaining millennial talent. And what we know is that right now we are leaving on the table a whole lot of talent, specifically in communities of color, that could do extraordinary things because we're not providing the access, we're not providing the connections, and we can absolutely do that. We also know that communities of color are coming to Minneapolis from other cities only to leave within a few short years. And the fact that retention rates are so low says something to us. We got to do something about this. And then finally, we got to be looking at city contracts. City contracts should not just be open to the select few. They should be open to everyone. And just by opening up the process broadly or philosophically saying we're going to do something about it doesn't make it change. We need to be affirmatively reaching out. We need to be providing access and opportunity for our Latino communities, our Black American communities in North Minneapolis, our Somali community, and our indigenous community as well. Because the reality is that the vast majority of the gains in wealth and the vast majority of our city contracts have gone to a white population. So affirmative outreach, making sure that the contracts are accessible, eliminating any language barriers that exist, and then ultimately providing the same opportunities that we've been providing for whites for communities of color for the long haul. So, this is just one little dab of our overall platform. You can go to jacobfrey.org, jacobfrey.org to get any additional information that you have. I would be honored to have your first choice vote. I'm asking for your first choice vote, and feel free to call me if you have any questions. 612-968-4443. Thanks so much.